Okay, welcome to part 2 of Bradley Viking Obsesses Over Midnight Sun. And full spoilers from here on out. But I think everyone should know about the beginning. The beginning of the book starts with Edward in the school and then quickly goes to the bio class where he first meets Bella, sniffs, smells her, and then goes crazy because her blood is so appeasing to him that he wants to kill her right then and there, and just drain her blood because it's, as he says later, his specific brand of heroin, and that's actually a line from Twilight. That's fine. But what makes it even more interesting is so from Belle's point of view, it's just Edward's really restrained and growling at her and looks at her with hatred, is acting super weird and disappears. And she only finds out later, oh, my blood is just smells perfect for you for eating, and you were trying not to kill me. Of course, now we're in Edward's head, so right away we're like, I want to kill her. But then he's like, damn it, I'm in a room full of witnesses. Okay, I gotta kill all of them. Alright. And then, it's just this insane. And it's so entertaining because it's like being in the head of a serial killer as he's sitting there plotting all these murders. It's like, alright, there's 20 kids in the class plus a teacher. So only one escape route. Alright, so if I kill her right away, I got about 5 seconds, I think. And then I really gotta get on eliminating witnesses. Okay, if I go down this road, I could kill about, I estimate 4 or 5 net, I could snap their necks 4 or 5 per second. I'm that freaking fast. Okay, or if I kill them all first, and leave them dead, then I can drink her blood in my pleasure. And he's like, no, don't kill. Okay, wait. Okay, what if I walk her home? What if I walk her to the next class and then I just lead her out into out of the building? And she would just follow me. Yes, and then I would kill a bunch of witnesses, and I could take my time and enjoy this. And he kind of feeds into the next psychotic fantasy in order to distract himself, so he doesn't ever act on anything. He uses his capability of overthinking against himself so that he does not commit murder. Essentially, it's pretty well written, highly entertaining, and I actually had to one time relate to that when, ironically enough, I had taken my stepsister to the theater to watch Breaking Dawn Part 1. And behind me were a couple of those giggly girls who every time something freaking happened, including again the first 40 seconds of that movie where Jacob takes his shirt off, and they're like and just getting excited over every little thing until someone told them to shut up. Had to rudely kind of tell them to be quiet. And I'm sitting there because I'm too much of a nice guy, especially then, to really then I was not assertive enough to really tell someone they were bothering me. So I was sitting there thinking, I was like, oh, Twilight, and yeah, so this was already out. Because I was thinking back to that episode, thinking hey, how quickly could I run up there and kill them? I also have the vampire super speed, so I can't do the dive next a second. But I think there's only 2 or 3 of them, and honestly, they're pretty small and I'm pretty big. I could probably take them out. And so that creepy bit went through my head, and now you all know about that. Please don't report me to any authorities because I did not hurt anyone that night, and I just instead watched Breaking Dawn, and it hurt all of us. Part 1, Part 1 hurt a lot of people. I actually enjoyed Part 2. It was weird. But that was then. This is now. Um, Onwards and upwards with the book. So we get a lot of little details of kind of what was going on. Where did Edward go when he just for a week? When he went to Alaska, but that's actually gone over pretty quick until he resolves. Yeah, okay, I'm gonna go back home, and that Tanya, who's part of the other vegetarian vampire coven, kind of has the hots for him, but also she basically just wants to bone him. And Edward's like, I am a chivalrous gentleman, and I would only do that long-term committed relationship, which I could not give you. Instead, I have to be obsessed with this girl that her mind is turned off to me, and also I want to eat her. I quite like this is in the again the original 12 chapters where we find first when Bella's in Port Angeles and gets attacked by a gang, cornered. Bella doesn't know who these people are. It's just a random gang of ruffians. And I think I didn't think they were had a terrible history. They were just a random gang of dudes who just formed up and like, let's go pester this woman, and maybe, and you don't quite, from Bella's point of view, right? You don't quite know what they're gonna do. Are they gonna beat her up? Are they gonna rob her? Are they gonna rape her? It's up to your imagination. Here, Edward's mind reader, so he knows that it's like, well, most of the accomplices are just kind of along for the ride. Their leader is actually a serial rapist killer who just, and apparently been like, and it was wanted in 2 states. And that, although there is like, because Meyer revealed like he was this horrible, we had to of course have follow up of like whatever happened to him, and then so Edward and Carlisle, like Edward goes finds Carlisle, and they like drug him and then drop him off in a police station next state, and like so he, arrested, taken to trial, and yeah, presumably dealt with by proper authorities. Even though Edward's very much like, I wanted to kill him, but that would be wrong. And I can at least relate to like wanting to be a better guy just because you're in love with a girl, even when you're kind of like, I don't even know if I have a hope with her, but just the mere fact that I want to be that better man that she could potentially be with. Like, there's relatability to this Edward guy, even when I like call him a sociopath and a creepy stalker and such. Like, there's moments where it's like, okay, I kind of feel you, and you entertain me. There was a hilarious moment right after, like, in the Port Angeles chapter is just freaking gold. Because, yeah, so first off, we get his rage of how Shot's just like, like, he wants to viciously torture this guy. And he also goes on about how he wasn't quite as bad as, like, the worst serial killer Edward ever met during his vigilante days, because you don't know. There was a time when he was a young vampire that he went and was, like, a vigilante. And he was basically Dexter. He used mind reading powers, find a bunch of, like, serial killers and rapists and such, and then drink their blood, saving any future victims. And it was, again, he had this code where he needed to make sure that they were guilty, and that they were so guilty that they would, like, that they weren't going to stop. And I swear it's an added bit where he has, like, the worst one I ever knew. Because the rest of them, they use drugs or drink to kind of cover up. Or they, like, 2 sides to them. And this one, though, he didn't regret anything, and I imagine too. One with them, that was cool. But there's also a very funny part though. Shortly after that, when they're in the car driving, and Edward basically figures out that Bella's figured out that he's a vampire, and so he's confronting her. He's like, "So about that?" It's like, "So what have you come to decide?" It's like, "I decided it didn't matter." He's like, "Okay, she's nuts," and he actually sits there. He's like, "Okay, I can arrange for like the best mental hospital, the best care," and there's a slight change in their original PDF, because I know from the live journal he said he would visit as often as he was allowed. In the audible book I listened to, I'm pretty sure he said as often as she would allow. So there is that slight change, which does change up the joke from the live journal. Was like, oh, Edward, only you would come up with like long-term care that included a stalking plan. So that was the thing. And honestly, I love it. Like, I mean, it's wrong, but every love story, when you break it down, has a lot of things wrong going on. That's like the joke of the internet, is every Disney love story is truly messed up and balances of power. Like, Romeo and Juliet is a mess. That one's awful, just going by the most famous ones. Any Greek tragedy, pretty much, just follows a lot of kidnapping. Beauty and the Beast is constantly debated about of how, like, healthy that relationship is, so on and so forth, right? So you know what, but both of them are into it. They're both messes of one's a vampire, just human, but like, they're both messed up individuals. And I think and Edward's just a bit more aware that he's the disaster. He openly calls himself a monster that like was doing something right. And there's moments where he knows like Bella's crazy. He basically acknowledges like she's crazy, that she's into him, that she doesn't just run away screaming as she should. Which, to be fair, like every other human pretty much is like creeped out by the Cullens, and she's not. And he's like, "You're weird," but he's also like, "But also you're a saint." Like, for all, like, in the original Twilight, of how much she describes how freaking pretty he is, it's pretty much how much, like, Edward in this one, despite when he, like, has these moments of awareness where he's like, you're crazy. Like, girl, there is something wrong with you. And that is believable in, like, Twilight, because in, like, Twilight, in the later books, he tells her, like, why are you with me? You could have a human life. Like, this whole vampire nonsense is messed up. But it's just more explicit here, where he's just like, you're crazy. But he's just like, but you're also, like, a perfect human being. Like, you're just amazing. You're a saint. You just constantly think, because you can't see inside her head. So you can't see all the whiny thoughts and the complaining about how dare boys like her. How dare people bother her. It's been a while. I think there's whiny thoughts about her father. Even though this one really confirms that, like, Charlie freaking just loves her so much. Like, you could read the 12 books, and if you're kind of going through the fine-tooth comb reading between the lines, you get this intense love, this father's love for his daughter, how, like, crazy he is about her. Especially in Breaking Dawn, when, like, it becomes more explicit in Breaking Dawn, when it's revealed, like, when she's sick, aka been turned into a vampire. Well, first, pregnant demon baby, then turned into a vampire. And he's separated from her, but he's also like, my daughter's sick, and I can't see her. What's wrong? And it's destroying him. Like, Jacob literally reports back, like, he's a mess. He's an utter mess. But here we have Edward seeing into Charlie's veiled thoughts. And this was a thing, right? We saw in the early chapters. So a thing we've been wondering for the, like, past 10 years or so. Okay. Charlie has sort of weird, like, muted thoughts. So Edward can't read Bella's mind. Edward can read Charlie's mind, but he can't get everything. It's like a filter. It's like, I guess it was like a really tinted window, like a super tint. So he can see flashes, and he can get, like, general, like, wordless impressions of kind of what he's feeling. Like, he's feeling concerned and such. And first he's like, just thinks he's panicking. And he realizes, like, no, he's quite coherent when he talks. But I can't see the full picture. So it's like looking through, like, a very tinted window, or just can only see into, like, a tiny keyhole. And so Edward's like, I wonder what her mom's brain's like. Like, what is it like in her mom's brain to kind of create this thing? So, like, little theory I had for years was that Renee also had a bit of this, like, psychic shielding. That it would also be, you can only get the general impression of her thoughts rather than explicit, like, here are the words. Although sometimes when Edward concentrates, you can get a bit more. You can get, like, a few images and such. As opposed to just a general impression of the thoughts. No. We finally get at the end of the book when, Bella's in the hospital. Right? All the same stuff with James and all that happens. Here's her thoughts. And this took me by surprise, and I just listened to this today. Is Renee's thoughts shout. These just shout out. And it's almost like, it like kind of throws Edward for a loop when he first hears it. To the point where he kind of theorizes that she has this, like, subtle psychic influence on people around her, so that they end up wanting to, like, do what she thinks. That she's subtly influencing them, but she doesn't know she's doing it, and they don't know that she's doing it. And it's sort of like, if she ever became a vampire, like, it would be this weird catalyst influencing, like, vampire power. And he's, like, kind of curious about it. And it's a weird combo that you have someone who shouts out their thoughts, and then you have someone whose, like, thoughts are semi-shielded, like, as if just advisor to create this person who's completely immune, becomes a shield, which we find in later books, and is immune to all sorts of psychic attacks, and can just have that. So there's that, and then, but also reminded me of, of Edward and Bella's baby Renesmee, who forces her thoughts into other people's brains. Although she can't do it from a distance, she has to touch them. She has to touch people, but through physical contact, she can push her thoughts into the brains of other beings, vampires and humans alike. So that was my thought on that. There's a lot more stuff on, like, not information wise, there's only so much actual information we learn in terms of cold hard facts. But stuff is fleshed out, given a bit more story. There's a lot of stuff from Edward's early vampire years. From how I can kind of put together the timeline, it's all pre World War II, because it's sort of like his first Christmas with Carlisle gets a flashback, a lot of flashbacks to when he met Esme. Esme is kind of more interesting here. Esme of all the Cullens has been like the most nothing character, right? She doesn't do much. She's just kind of there, and she's there, and she's loving, and she's caring. Great. Here she actually has a few moments. Not a lot. She's still like the least explored Cullen. Poor mom Cullen, but she has a bit more moments, and there is like flashback to when Carlisle first created her. We get flashback. We don't get much on we get brief mention of when Rosalie first joined the family. We get the full scene of when she saved Emmett. It's the same story of her saving him attacked by the bear, but there's seeing it from Edward's point of view, remembering her coming home after dragging him 100 miles, and just desperate for this man to be saved. We get the point of view of when Alice and Jasper join the family, and that's actually kind of a fun bit. And we get when Edward comes back. There's a lot of time devoted. He just kind of drifts off. He's usually talking to Bella, and then he'll kind of drift away into a flashback. There's a lot more of Bella and Edward talking, I feel. Again, I have to go back and read Twilight, but I'm when they're just in school and he's in he lists all these different movies, and he asks her favorite movie and her favorite color and this and that. All her favorite books, and then she just goes on and on and on, oh, I like this movie and this movie, Empire Strikes Back and the Holy Grail and blah blah, and my music tastes are based off my mom, and so they're super old because her music tastes are from her mom, so I don't even know what I like, and all these classical books, and I just only read classical literature, and honestly I was not. There was one book in there I thought okay, that's pretty good. It's mainly Jane Austen and other stuff I haven't read, so I don't know, but I feel that was I have to go back and confirm, but I'm I don't think this was there in Twilight. I think Bella summed it up as he interrogated me all day about all these details, and the only kind of conversation we hear is when they talk about favorite colors, because she has kind of this weird, interesting answer about brown, because everything in Forks is covered in moss. Yeah, and I know I'm jumping back and forth throughout the book. But yeah, it's we take all this time with them, and it's actually to the point of, I don't know, seeing it from Edward's point of view, and a lot of them talking, I actually, I buy it. I buy them being a couple. I buy them, hanging out, having chemistry. There's enough chemistry there. I don't know, maybe it's the way the reader reads it. Jake Abel, you're doing a good job. But yeah, I buy into the chemistry. But yeah, I was very excited to get to the meadow scene, because the sample chapter was cut off before there. You're oh, how does it look? I know what happens, but how's it from Edward's point of view? And you know what? I was not disappointed, especially how he's when he's running around going crazy, with explaining how duperly overpowered vampires are. It's kind of weird that people criticize how the vampires are overpowered in this world, when in the very first book he lampshades it. He's we're ridiculous level of overkill. Okay, speed and strength alone, nothing stands a chance. But I also lure you in. We have special powers. It's yeah, it's I'm designed to be beautiful, so you get lured in. I even smell good to you, just so you would stand there and let me eat you, even though that's pointless. Cause yeah, I could run you down, and this super vision and super hearing, so it's not you have any chance of getting away, and not you can fight me off. I do they estimate it's breaks a log off a tree, basically breaks a tree off, because he estimates it's about 863 pounds, and throws it. That's very ridiculous. I love it. But yeah, we get through all that. Then when we get to the climax, it rushes. But the original Twilight book was pretty bad for that too. It is pretty interesting to see whatever they separate. So while we have Bella hanging out in a hotel room with Jasper and Alice and learning about Alice mainly, I feel like Jasper does more in this than he does in Twilight. In Twilight, he's just kind of there. Because I don't think Meyer had sorted out his backstory of being in the Civil War yet. Even though, like, she definitely had the backstory for Emmett. Because there's, like, the latest scene where he's telling her. I think she had a Rosa. Like, Jasper was kind of the weird one where we hadn't. Okay, maybe there was a Civil War bit, but there wasn't the bit about, like, the Mexican vampire war thing where he's recruited to be a soldier in that. But there's a little plot hole that I'd never. But yeah, while we're doing that, it's like, Edward, Carla, and Emmett are trying to chase down James and kill him. And I'm excited because I'm from Alberta. So I get a little Alberta shout out where they're going off to Calgary. They even mentioned Edmonton in a sentence. I'm like, what? But they don't go to Edmonton. They don't even go to Calgary. They turn off in Banff. And I'm like trying to figure out like this whole chase sequence because like these places are so far apart from each other, at least from a human perspective. Well, it's like Banff. It's like the southern end of Banff. But if they're coming from the Washington area, right? My frame reference is like they're rather than pull them out and figure out where Forks and Port Angeles all this is they're about Seattle-ish, right? So if you're kind of coming up, then yes, you would hit Banff before you hit Calgary, unless you're coming, especially since they just seem heading steadily north to Rockies, and it seemed like they went through Montana. So it seems more like they'd be heading up into Canada sooner, probably in British Columbia. The geography is still a bit messed of why they're going all the way, veering off all the way into Alberta, instead of just going straight north into British Columbia. That was a bit weird to me. Although I think she at least kind of cracked up in like what southern Alberta looks like when she mentions it's drier, which is true. So there was that, and how like they're in Banff and they turn around and they're like chasing through the mountains. I'm like, okay, it's pretty broad, but I was hoping they'd like go into Calgary and I could like make fun of the fact like, oh, you got all this geography about Calgary wrong. But she successfully avoids that. But yeah, the chase with James is weird because honestly, it feels like fighter aircraft. Just how much because they're able to run so fast that but they're able to keep this awareness of each other from like vast distances. Edward literally says like, I need about a 600-mile buffer room, so if he runs, I can chase him down. If I have 600 miles of room of like flat ground to chase him, it's like 600 miles is freaking long. Like that is longer than the distance from Edmonton to Calgary. Yeah. That's like 3 times. Like it's about 300 kilometers, and 1.6 kilometers to a mile. So horseback math is about 3 times as this Edmonton to Calgary. It's freaking long. You'd be jumping borders. Unless you started from like the northern end of the province to the southern end, which they don't do. But yeah, I said 600 miles was like from the mountains out to the coast. Like it's a ridiculously long distance. But yeah, that's the kind of things like, okay, he's in range, and it's like that's like a few miles off, but I can hear thoughts. And how they're just running around, and the distances in this sequence of trying to chase down and ambush James is pretty interesting because like he doesn't go in much detail, but he's telling Bella. It's funny because at one point Bella accuses. And this is in Twilight books where he says like, he's like, oh, I tell you everything, you edit, and we find out like, yeah, he does, he edits. But it was quite. It's a quick sequence, but it's a pretty exciting sequence of them, and it feels like fighter jet combat, like how actual fighter jet combat works, not dogfighting, but where there'd be like something off like a spec and like missiles lock on fire, or maybe like naval combat, where again it's like. You lock on with your radar and then fire at them is what it feels like because there's these vast distances and they're chasing each other, trying to corner them. Edward doesn't have a good time with people's names. He spends the first half of the book calling Bella the girl, and when he meets James, he calls him the tracker. He calls him the tracker about like 50 times more than he calls him James. You could probably just like count on your fingers how many times James even comes up, the little name James, but he's always like the tracker. we get more details of the fight, and it is basically how it's described in Twilight, where it's like, oh, it's a pretty exciting sequence where they steal Ray's car, described in loving detail, probably from Meyer's brothers, because they're the car guys. They steal Ray's car, race, and then like immediately have cops behind them because they start going 150 miles an hour and end up going like 170, using nitrous tanks. Freaking have to crash the car, they stop the car, throw it into traffic, and then they steal another car and race off again. So yeah, steal 2 cars. And then all for Edward to show up just in the nick of time to literally knock James off, and then he has to treat Bella while Jacob and Emmett just catch James and Tim apart. We get a bit more details on that. There's it's quite interesting. The baseball game, I feel, goes on too long. Like the play-by-play was the one part where I was getting annoyed. Like, just get on with it. The movie is pretty insufferable. The movie, I feel, I'm gonna watch it again after finishing this video, but has that sequence pretty short until we get to James and his coven showing up, and it's just we're going through all of these plays, and it's I get it. No one's here for vampire baseball. But when James shows up, it's a very interesting. It's much more I'd have to pick a book and such, but there's things going on that I'm like, oh, Meyer, you retcon, but you solved the plot hole I never saw, and this is my praise. This is my praise. I never saw this plot hole. I should have if I was thinking more critically. And then you kind of inserted this, and the only question raised is why does this never happen again? So later books establish that Jasper looks just like another one of the Cullens to human eyes, but the vampire eyes, who can see more details, they see in HD basically, but in real life, that he's this war-scarred freak. Because we established in clips that he was fought in the vampire wars in New Mexico or something, right? Where they would just create armies of new vampires who, when they're first created, have all this enhanced strength, and he uses emotion controlling powers to train these forces, and he fought, and he has so much experience fighting, but he's also wounded to hell because he's bitten all the time, because the best way for vampire to kill vampires is their teeth. And that's their venom is the only thing that couldn't cause them to scar. Otherwise, if they kind of they just kind of pulled him apart or whatever, and he magically reattached, he wouldn't have much in terms of scars, just the venom. So he's covered in these bite marks. And when Bella first turns into a vampire, she sees him and is holy crap! The scars are the most definitive part of his body. He basically kind of looks like sexy Mad-Eye Moody, but with both eyes. But how I always imagine Mad-Eye Moody in the book, where it's just this massive scars, and you barely see the features of his face. Before the movies came out, I was imagining this thing in the books, how it's described just scars everywhere. And yeah, or I think if you Daredevil on the villain from season 2 got face. Okay, if anybody can remember what the facial scar guy played by Prince Caspian there, his character was, yeah, that's essentially how Jasper is supposed to look to vampires. So because we created that later, Jigsaw is the Punisher dude I'm thinking of. So the villain with the messed up face. He's basically supposed to look like Jigsaw from the Punisher, not Jigsaw from the Saw movies. And be really intimidating. So that's the case of when James and Coven first meet our boy Jasper. Why are they not freaked out about him? And so Edward realizes that Jasper's doing this weird emotion cloaking that Bella wasn't in on because he wasn't doing it to her. But he's essentially trying to make James and Laurent and Victoria all think that he's just make them ambivalent towards him. So somehow by messing with their emotions, it doesn't quite make sense because it seems more psychic than hormone manipulation, even though Jasper's abilities are supposed to be hormone manipulation, which is why it works on Bella. The he makes himself look non-threatening. He's able to sort of do this weird camouflage ability where like he's there, but it's like so just he creates like a somebody else's problem field. He's there, but he's just so uninteresting that he's not worth noticing. And he does the same for Alice, and he does the same for Bella until like they smell her and kind of the field fails. But he makes Edward and Emmett look more intimidating. He makes Emmett look intimidating as hell, which Emmett's already pretty like he's supposed to be big and strong and just like looking at a grizzly bear. But he makes him look as scary as like if a grizzly bear now had chainsaws for hands. I mean, that's not the analogy they use. They should have. Stephenie Meyer, you should have called him like as if a grizzly bear had grown chainsaws. But that's essentially like this guy's like the ground shaking is like the effect this is having in such. And yeah, that's actually like pretty exciting, like baller move for Jasper, and we covered up a plot hole that I didn't even think about, but was definitely there when we later was created by later events of like Jasper being this like freak. Also, Jasper, we find out likes Bella like from the beginning. He likes being around Edward and Bella because they're just like so in love. He just feeds off the emotions, and I don't remember that from the original Twilight. Like I do not remember that fact. I just remember Jasper being very standoffish because he's always like afraid that he'll lose control and drink blood. Of course, Jasper doesn't really become that interesting of a character until the third book. But then, like, when his backstory is revealed, he becomes very interesting. Oh, and Edward totally has a crush on Jacob here, which becomes really ironic when they later start fighting over Bella. But, like, when he's first in Jacob's brain, he's like, he's really nice. It's just, like, in all their encounters, even later on when Billy sends him to, like, warn Bella that this is a vampire and you should stay away from him. He's just like, oh, but he's such a nice kid. And there's early signs of like Jacob becoming a werewolf because he's like he's in his brain. It's like weird. Bella smells bad. What's going on? This bad smell, which is like because werewolf vampires smell bad to werewolves, and Edward's right there. We find out Edward, like a lot of scenes where we didn't know Edward was around. Turns out he was around the entire time, just watching from the bushes, like a good stalker. He basically has like a little minor crush on Angela because he's like. Oh yeah, he's inside Bella's friend's heads, and turns out Jessica's horrible. Like Jessica's already like, but then turns out like even when we thought she was being nice to Bella, turns out no, she was thinking like just the meanest thoughts all the time. Meanwhile, Angela is a pure angel, angel, woo, and only thinks wholesome thoughts, except when she's thinking about Ben, which I mean, just all Edward tells him that she likes him, but no. No, she was thinking dirty thoughts about Ben. I'm just going to say that. I'm just going to claim it right there. And we find out the reason why Angela and Ben end up together is because Edward goads him on, like, does a little play. Because he's just like, Angela's a really nice person. You know what? She deserves a reward for being nice. And he tries to figure out what she wants, but she's so wholesome and so pure that it's not like she just wants some little trinket, like he could buy her a necklace or something to be fine. It's like, oh, but she wants this boy. Okay. So he puts on a little play with Emmett in this Spanish class. And been like, oh yeah, I was gonna ask out Angela, but she turned me down. She said she likes some Ben dude. And he's like, and Ben's sitting right there. And he's like, oh, you're Ben. Like, oh. And Ben's like, okay, you know what? Oh, she likes me? Okay, I'm gonna, alright, screw this. Screw being 6 inches shorter than her. I'm gonna ask her out because I like her. You know what? I can't let you around her, Colin. He's gonna like, I respect that. I respect that you want to defend her from a guy that you subconsciously know is a vampire. You don't know him a vampire, but you subconsciously know him actually dangerous to human life. And, sorry, bro, you might actually be worthy of her. And that's, like, there's a lot of little cool moments. Like that, little extra little scenes. And having Edward's perspective on things is quite interesting. Especially when, like, Bella sees him as, like, bleak and cold and collected. And we say from Edward, and he's, like, flailing about. And it's like, I am such an idiot. And why could anyone ever be charmed like me? And what the hell am I doing? And is this working? Does she even like me? He's all like, does she even like me? And but we know from Bella's point of view, it's like he is the most gorgeous god I've ever seen. How could I love him so much? But how could he even notice a little fly like me, an ant, the plain girl? He's all like, oh, but I'm a monster. But like he kind of says that later on, so it's not the biggest reveal of him being like, how could you even like me when you have like options to be a human? But it is funny, just both of them totally undervaluing, like they both kind of like undervalue themselves, low self-esteem, very insecure, but they're both crazy about each other. So like, you know, like, good for them. It's not the healthiest of relationships, but what is? There's something else. I don't know. Honestly, go like pick it up or just live vicariously through me of enjoying rambling about this, because it has actually been a lot of fun, and I took a lot of bookmarks, and I needed to make a lot more bookmarks. Oh, there was a weird, it's kind of weirdly analogous. There's a weird ass scene when Edward's thinking about he thinks a couple times of his vigilante days, like, yeah, you know, I just went and killed people, and I spent like 10 years eating terrible people, right, when he's off being Dexter. And but there's this one where he's like, all of them were guilty, and they were gonna do it again. Except the one man, he was like, well, he wasn't innocent, but he wasn't guilty either. Because he finds, I literally wrote my bookmark, like, WTF is this guy? Because it just mentions this guy, he starts stalking his family, like, okay, Edward, and like, and the girl there, I'm like, okay. Then the girl's 5 years old. Uh-huh. And then this guy is like buying ropes and getting rags and stuff. And the entire time is just like, no, I can't do this. But I'm gonna get ready. No, I can't do this. Get ready. And then he goes to kidnap this girl. This 5-year-old girl in this poor family. And they're poor, so they're a poor family. So it's not for ransom. It's never explicitly said what he's gonna do, but it's freaking obvious what he was gonna do. It's pretty horrible. So Edward, like, basically is watching this dude watch this girl, because he's like, well, he hasn't done anything yet, so I can't like just go kill him for doing nothing. And then see, I can read his thoughts. So he's constantly start warring with himself, like, I can't do it. Until finally he's like there, and he's like, I can do it. And then Edward like zooms in and like takes him to the roof before he touches the child. And the guy's like, oh, thank God something stopped me. And, you know, and then Edward kills him. But I found it, like, on reflection, like, this is kind of analogous to Edward himself. Where, I mean, it's not as awful because, ew. But, I mean, Edward constantly is like, I should not be doing this. He literally, the most common analogy in the book. Okay. He in the first 12 chapters, kind of stops off after they start going out. But when he starts flirting with Bella, interacting with her, he keeps this mantra in his brain, run, Bella, run, stay, Bella, stay. And then later this transitions into this pomegranate analogy. He keeps saying the pomegranate. That's what, if you see the cover of the book, like, what's that? It's a pomegranate, but it's like got open bits so you can see the seeds. Seeds are also important part, because if you don't know, this is about the myth of Hades and Persephone. And it's probably one of the more accurate, like, kind of weird analogies to, like, you know, literature and mythology that Stephenie Meyer uses, because the cover of the first Twilight is, like, the apple. It's supposed to be the Garden of Eden apple. But that, like, it's sort of, like, fall, sin. I don't think it doesn't fit very well in my mind. This, where Edward, and constantly throughout, after about chapter 12 or so, he's constantly bringing up pomegranate seeds. If you don't know the story of Persephone and Hades kidnaps Persephone, drags her out to the end of the world to be his wife, and then she eats 6 pomegranate seeds. Because they're like underworld pomegranates, she's now stuck there for half the year. She has to spend 6 months of the year for the 6 seed shade, because they're of the underworld, eating of the land of the dead. You come of the dead. So it's just to be queen, and that's why we have winter, is essentially how that's explained. Because her mother is the goddess of, like, nature, Demeter. And so when her daughter's going, it's like, yes, screw it, I quit, go on vacation. And then winter happens. And Edward is constantly, after he gets over run, Bella, run, stay, Bella, stay, he's like, and the pomegranate seeds are back again. And he never actually he never goes into detail about Hades and Persephone. Those names are, he might say Persephone, he never says Hades. But he does, although he does mention the underworld. The implication is clear, is he views himself as Hades, dragging sweet Persephone to the underworld, and that if she continues to take part in his world, that she will not be able to go back to hers. Right? By partaking in his world, she'll get too involved and will never be able to go back fully. She might be able to visit, but she'll never be able to fully return. She'll always have to come back to his world. I don't know, you could do a whole thing with the Hades Persephone analogy. But that is a very commonly, it kind of got annoying actually a little bit with the whole pomegranate. It's like, I freaking get it. But it is weird that he brings up the story of a man, he like couldn't control himself, the crime he was going to commit. And then meanwhile, Edward cannot control himself in terms of going after Bella. Like, so many times he's like, I shouldn't do this. This is wrong. I should run away. I should not talk to her. She has a life to live. She could do all those things. And, like, he kind of says those in the main book, too. But now we're in his head, so it's like, oh, you didn't even say it as many times as you were thinking it, which was a lot. You were thinking a lot of how, but he can't stay away. He can't stop himself. And I don't know if this was deliberate or not. Because it was a really random aside of this random criminal, and it was a really uncomfortable part, as it's really darn creepy. It's probably the creepiest part for me, because it's very slowly revealed. Because first off, I was like, I wasn't quite innocent, and he wasn't quite guilty either. Like, okay, where's this going? You're like, oh, and you're like, that's a sped up of my reaction. Luckily, no one noticed that face I was making at work. That said, I still really enjoyed this book. Thank you for staying with me and watching. Subscribe to my channel. Listen to me rant about other things. There's my rant about Midnight Sun. Thank you, Stephenie Meyer, after all these years.